We're going to be talking about regenerative gardening practices. This is part of our rooted and resilient homesteading skills series. I'm Garrett Livermore, and this event is being recorded and will be available. We'll send out a link with the recording and extra resources in the next couple of days. We're getting quicker. It took us almost a week the first time, but we're down to a day or two. So look for that if you want to go back to anything or see the slides or well, there'll definitely be some good resources, particularly for this one. There's some full PDFs of books, which are very useful on soil science and particularly managing soils in an organic way. So this is my quote of the evening, just one tonight. Land then is not merely soil, it is a fountain of energy flowing through a circuit of soils, plants, and animals. This is something that I believe strongly, and this evening's topic really proves that, is that when you work in a garden and you work with soil and you work with plants and other living creatures, you find that there is connections and that the energy definitely flows from one to the other. So this was written by Aldo Leopold, a famous environmentalist, in his book, Sand County Almanac. So again, this is part of the series. A question that people have is, what is regenerative gardening? And it's a method of growing plants that focuses on restoring soil health, increasing biodiversity, and improving ecosystem resilience, all while producing food and flower sustainably. It's a real focus on being self-reliant as much as possible in your gardening practice so that you can produce your own soil, maintain the soil and grow the soil, this fertility of the soil, make your own soil amendments so that both for economic reasons, you having to go out and buy things, and also for environmental reasons, you can produce most of what you need right in your own home. Regenerative gardening builds healthy soil through composting, mulching, and minimizing disturbance. So it's really being sensitive to what the ground needs and how you can maximize production while not hurting the soil and growing it over the long term. It supports biodiversity by creating habitats for pollinators, beneficial insects, and soil microbes, and it improves ecosystem resilience by using natural cycles to capture water, store carbon, and reduce waste. So it ends up being a very productive system that is going to get you vegetables and plants with a minimum of store-bought inputs and a maximum of your own materials. Tonight, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to talk about the 5 principles of regenerative ag. We're going to talk about quite a bit about soils, because soils are key to this, and soils are key to gardening, and maximizing and understanding your soils is really important in the long run. And there's a lot, I see a lot of misunderstandings of soils and what they do and they don't do, and how they behave over time. And then we're going to talk about some homemade soil amendments and fertilizers that you can produce at home, again, for minimal cost and maximal benefit. So we're going to start with the 5 principles of regenerative agriculture. So one of the things, the first one is maximize crop diversity. It's been shown that having a number of different plants and rotating those plants through your gardening space really enhances your soil health. It enhances your soil health by, first of all, not stripping out. If you monocrop and repeat over and over, it's going to strip out certain nutrients. You don't do that. You also support microbes and fungi that are beneficial to your plants. So it's going to be good for your soil health. The resilience is that you're not dependent upon one crop, that you can have other crops. So if if you had a really bad powdery mildew infestation in your squash, which I've had for the last few years, you can rely on other things or other types of squash that are more resistant. So it's going to give you the best bumper against crop failure. It supports biodiversity. It's going to support biodiversity in terms of pollinators that come and keep your fruits and vegetables pollinated. And it also improves the nutritional yield, that there's going to be more vitamins and minerals for you and your family from having a healthy soil and a diverse crop. So protecting the soil surface is really important. It's something that we really need to focus on, is that to minimize bare soil as much as possible. And that's through several methods. We're going to talk about tillage in a little bit, but by growing cover crops, mulch, composting, and others, you can reduce erosion. It's going to keep moisture in, so you'll be watering less and less effort to water. It moderates the soil temperature if we have a hot summer, and it helps suppress weeds. Because that's a major problem, as we all know, is keeping your garden weeded in the heart of the summer. Maintaining living roots is kind of a corollary to that. That's going to keep the underside of the soil healthy by keeping the soil microbiome going, keeping the life cycle of those biological creatures going. It improves nutrient cycling. One thing that it's discovered really just in the last few years is how important it is to understand the nitrogen cycle. That nitrogen is a gas that is a substance that moves frequently and you can't test it at any given time because it'll change in sometimes a few minutes. So by having plants with like legumes that are going to bring nitrogen into the ground and fix it, um, that helps keep it on. Whereas a bare soil, the nitrogen and other nutrients kind of escape into the atmosphere or run off in water. Um, enhances soil structure and suppresses weeds. So minimizing soil disturbance, and that's a real choice to make. We have to do some disturbance of the soil to plant seeds and to make sure that there's competitive weeds aren't growing. And depending upon what your physical situation is, your layout is the amount that you can uh, control that. If you have an open garden and you're doing a large area, quarter acre, whatever it is, you're going to have to do some tilling, but you don't have to do a lot of tilling. And that's going to help build our soil structure, preserve soil biology. It reduces carbon emissions because every time you disturb the soil, like even by tilling, it releases some carbon into the atmosphere. And we know now that soil is one of the largest carbon sinks on Earth, that it draws in soil through plant growth and holds it. But then when you till it up, it releases some. And in some ways, that's good in that it releases those nutrients to plants that you're planting in the ground. But if you over-till, it's going to release that, and you're going to lose all that nutrients to the atmosphere or to runoff. And finally, conserves time and energy. That tilling too much is gonna take a lot of time and effort, and it's going to burn you physically out. And finally, integrating livestock. And in the garden scale, it's hard to integrate livestock, a better creature to integrate into your garden than chickens. But of course, you don't want to let chickens free range on your garden because they will. These are my chickens. They're an old flock. They're no longer with us. But if you let them go free range on your garden, it's freshly planted, you'll have to replant your garden in very short order because they will look at that as a snack bar. But they are an excellent adjunct to the garden because they can they can process your compost very quickly. If you let them loose in a garden that's just been tilled or you've just harvested, they will kind of go through that and they'll pick through that. They're producing fertilizer. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And it just gives you another food source and means of supporting the chickens and their contribution to your homestead. So we're going to start by talking about soils. So it's good to look at a definition of soil because we often don't think too much about it, but it's a very important thing. Soil is a collection of organic and inorganic bodies on the Earth's surface, modified by the surrounding environment or even made by humans, with characteristic chemical, physical, and biological properties. In gardening, soil is somewhat is going to determine what it is we grow and how well we grow it. And how well we manage it will be a way we can shape the success of future gardening efforts for ourselves and others. So major soil components are essentially mineral components, sand and other things, organic matter, which the mineral soils tends to be, greater than 20% by weight. Organic matter is, typically when we do soil tests, we want to see a minimum of 5% organic matter. We see sometimes up to 8 or even 10% in well-established gardens that people have been working on. And then air and water is an important part of that. You should test your soil to see what to, because we think we have clay and we think we have loam or sand, but it's really good to know exactly what it is that we have. And there's two ways of doing this. One is this water jar test, which is just, picking out a representative lump of soil, maybe, a 6 ounce cup or so. Uh, Put the soil in the mason jar, fill the water with, until it's quarter full. Uh, Add water, and dispersing agent is as a detergent-like product like borax. Shake it and let it settle, and just let it set, and it will settle naturally into its different levels. And by that way, you can look at it, and you can see which type of soil you are. I know that here in the Mohawk Valley, our primary soils are mostly clay oriented with some loam. Those of us who are lucky have the loamy soils. You can also do the ribbon test. This is a very quick one. Just pick up a handful of moist soil, knead it into a ball, and then start squeezing it. And you want to see how long you can get that ribbon to go before it breaks. And this is a measure. I've never actually measured against this, but it just gives me a sense. I can look at it and know what it is, by how quickly it breaks apart or doesn't break apart. The soil triangle is a useful tool to kind of analyze. Like most things, you want to be in the center of that if possible. And we have ways of kind of adjusting soil, which we're going to talk about, by adding organic matter, which will help steer it in one direction or the other. But it's good to just have an understanding of, where you are in this triangle. If you're in an extreme place, we probably feel like we're really in that clay area, but generally we're not. None of the soils I've seen are ever that bad. They tend to be the silty clay or clay loam. I once lived in a home and gardened in soil that was almost entirely sand. There was a 4-inch layer of topsoil and then sand, because an area that the glaciers retreated from at some point, melted and dumped a band of sand across. It was in Burlington, Vermont, and it was easy to work with, but it was hard to keep it watered, and I had to add a lot of organic material to keep it fertile. So, the 3 soil types we are dealing with are sand, which drains fast but needs a lot of organic matter and add fertility. So, I mean, sometimes we look at sand and think, well, sandy soils, and that's great because it's easy to work. Silt or loam is the middle ground. That's where we want to be, with smooth, fertile, and it compacts. Clay, actually, people say they can't garden. I've had people say they can't garden because it's too clayey. But you can always add organic matter to a growing area and loosen it up enough to grow in our region. I've never seen it. You can't grow it in it. And it does actually do very well in terms of nutrient. So what we're going to talk about is how developing the right strategy for adjusting your soil to make it work for you. And it's good to remember what the plants and the roots need. They need to have some open air space in that soil. That's one of the problems with clay, is that sometimes it restricts the flow of oxygen or gas exchange. It needs space to grow. It needs to support those plants, water supply, nutrients. It needs to adjust to the temperature. It needs to hold the temperature, which we're now going to. It's hard to think about gardening when I'm looking out my window and I can see snow, but we will soon be planting. So organic matter is really the most critical thing that we can adjust in any soil type. It does a lot of good things for us. It improves the structure. It's going to manage water much better because it will allow it to soak into a soil more quickly and also hold. And it creates a space that roots can travel in much easier and grow and draw in moisture and nutrients much more readily. And then it acts like a sponge, and it's also a prevention from compacting. So where do you get organic matter? Organic matter is easy to find. It's everywhere around us. This is the kind of the key to our own um, fertility. Compost from yard waste, food scraps, and other materials that you process. You can get animal manure from farm animals, cows, chickens, rabbits, never humans or pets, though, because of our diet. Uh, or cover crops. And we'll talk a little bit more about cover crops in a little bit. And plant residue. If you have tree work done or if tree work's being done in the neighborhood, often the tree people are looking for places to dump wood chips. And wood chips, although they draw in a lot of nitrogen, you need to kind of compensate for that, are an excellent long-term soil amendment. So, so common soil problems, overworking can be a problem. It's rare in home gardens, particularly in this region. It's much more common. It's very common with commercial ag soils, particularly in the Midwest or the South, where they're putting multiple crops. It's heavily fertilized and heavily pesticide, so there's a lot of chemical inputs, and that kind of deadens the soil. And also because they're using heavy machinery and heavy ag machine, it compacts the soil and it destroys the soil structure. I traveled with my son a couple of years ago, helping him move, and we were going through Arkansas, and I stopped at a cotton field. And the soil, it was right next to the gas station. I went over and I started looking at it. And you could pick it up. It was very loose and friable, but it had absolutely no structure to it because they had to do several crops a year, very heavily uh, mechanized, and it just really was just kind of like a sterile growing medium you might see in a nursery. So what do you do instead? You can do things like do minimal tillage. So I have to till because I have an open garden like that one there. I till in the spring. I just turn it over. I turn over the winter cover crop and then build my raised beds with a tiller. And then I don't till it again until the fall when I turn it in and then plant my cover crop. So it's twice a year. It's not heavy. I don't go down too deep. And if I was to use it for cultivating, I don't use it. I have a smaller mini tiller that I've used sometimes for cultivating, but it's set very shallow, so it's not going to get deep into the soil structure. There are alternate garden styles of gardening that you can use that really don't use a mechanical tillage and are quite successful. So raised beds, build up raised beds, and you don't really need to because you're at your smaller area and you can use hand tools. Lasagna gardens are gardens that are built up out of layers of compost and cardboard. Um, that create a nice growing medium in and of itself. Or there's a very interesting one called hugelkultur, which is building raised beds, but the core of the raised bed, the base, is sticks and wood and yard waste, and then soils over it. And that core gradually rots and degrades and releases its nutrients into the soil, which supports the growing of the plants. And you can also work with planting great garden layouts that use minimal cultivation. And finally, just set your tillers to the lowest setting necessary. So you're not going deep into the soil structure every time, particularly if you're using it for cultivation. Soil compaction. I talked about it from an ag sense, but many people in villages, particularly if you have a house in the village and you have a yard, sometimes those yards have been used as parking lots or driveways. Sometimes they have had machinery parked on them, and soil compaction can be a real issue. It restricts the root growth. It's not allowing the water and air to get into the soil. So it's very hard to grow in that. And the nutrient availability is like next to none, and eventually erosion. So the most important thing is to understand the depth of the problem. I worked with a community garden in Frankfurt, and we did actually a penetrometer test. The community garden in Frankfurt, if you're familiar with it, is built, is created in the park, and they're basically using raised beds. But the soil, this park itself is long and linear, and it was once the old site of the Erie Canal, and it was filled with we don't know what fill. So I borrowed a penetrometer from one of the ag folks, and a penetrometer tests the resistance of a point going into the ground. And about 6 inches down, you went from topsoil into something that was very, very hard. It was like I almost had to force it in with heavy bodily weight. It was the highest rating that we had seen on that particular um, uh, instrument. And that meant that it would be very hard to garden in that soil, that you're compelled to use a raised bed and build on top of that. So it's really important to understand that. So if you're starting a new garden and you're in a town or village, figure it out. If you don't need a penetrometer, you can just take some tests with a shovel, dig down and see how compacted your soil is. If you do have it, you can first understand the problem. If you have the ability to use a tiller, have a tiller available, do a deep till. You can also, if you're in a field growing situation, you can even do things like tillage radishes, which are really daikon radishes, the Japanese radishes, long, big radishes will actually drill through hardpan. And they're successfully used to break up hardpan in a natural way. And then finally, you want to avoid future problems. So stay away from where traffic areas might be on your property when you locate your garden. Another common soil problem is working. Was it too wet or dry? Right now, the weather today was not great, but when it's a nice warm day, I think about getting into the ground, but I can't do that until the soil dries out a bit because we have to wait until it is workable. So don't work it when it's too wet or too dry. We don't get that too much around here. We tend to have the opposite extreme. So, and this is a very simple one, just work when the conditions are right. You might have to go over it a couple of times and integrate compost or topsoil in if the soil structure is really like you see in this picture. And keep the soil covered through the season with mulch, cover crops, etc. Oops. And now this is actually very common in this region, and I have this problem in my garden, is suddenly I built the garden and somehow the water patterns in my backyard changed and I had a stream running through it. And like should have anticipated that, but I didn't quite. And it's a very damaging because it draws away water and it draws away fertility and topsoil. It breaks up the structure. So what I did actually was build some swales, shallow trenches around the garden to redirect the water. It's been somewhat, but not 100% successful. You can also use landscaping design. Willow trees actually suck up an amazing amount of water. So if you can put a willow tree heads up above your garden, because you have to give a good amount of distance because their roots spread, they will actually draw in a tremendous amount of water. Or you can do smaller plantings of other things. Uh, Another problem that we see is chemical and fertility imbalance. Basically, what you want to grow and the soil are two different things, the most common of which is the blueberry that you see here. People want to grow blueberries, and blueberries really demand a very acidic soil to be successful. They evolved on mountaintops in the Northeast and Maine and New England and things, used to a very thin soil, very acidic soil, and actually don't really need all that much nutrition, but they need to have a acidic soil of 4 to 5. Um, so you can do that. You can balance it out with sulfur would bring that down. And sulfur is, because it's an organic mineral, is considered an organic treatment. But you need to anticipate that because it takes time for that pH to change. And you also need to keep it at it because it will revert back to that. But when you test your soil, always look for a pH of about 5 to 6, somewhere in that range. So have your soil tested, know what you have, and then use organic amendments to address those issues. Poor fertility. This is something that is surprising to me, how much of a difference a regular regimen of fertilizer can make. These are garlic cloves, and it's not really quite as representative as I've wanted, but I've had people come in and they will show me a picture of a garlic bulb they grew a couple of years ago. It was huge, it was almost the size of a fist. And then they're getting down to like those smaller ones on the right side. So what's happening? And it's almost always they're not providing enough fertility and fertility at the right time. Um, Garlic is actually is a very heavy feeder, and it likes its food when it's put into the ground, and then again right about this time of year, and then it may be a dose or two more, but you don't want to do it too much once the sprouts start to come up, because if you put too much nitrogen in, it will put all the effort into the green and none into the bulb. So you need to be careful about what amendments you use and the timing of them, but using them is absolutely critical. And using them more than once, through the season. That's another reason to use organics that we'll talk about in a moment, is there's a little danger of burning or damage through over-fertilization because they tend to be weaker, but you do need to do it on a regular basis. Just another kind of the problems with the fertility is they have a low resistance to diseases and pests, and you have also lower nutrition. We talked about that. So just a couple of final thoughts on soil management. And that is that soil has a natural state. Your soil is what it is, and that you will work it and you want to get it up to where you want it to be. And that is great. But over time, the soil tends to revert back to its original state. So once you get up to that state where you want it to be, you have to keep at it. You can't just let it go. I once went to a site visit where a family was looking to reestablish a garden on a property that their grandfather once grew, these famous, family lore tomatoes. And we couldn't figure out where the garden was. I thought I could just, look in the soil, but the soil had all reverted back to whatever it was originally. Um, and also the nutrients that your plants and vegetables take out of the ground that you're eating and consuming actually need to be replaced to keep your garden productive and your products nutritious. So it's a process, it's an ongoing process. It's not one and done. So we're going to talk a little bit about homemade soil amendments and fertilizers, some things you can do to really build your fertility up and expand your soil's capacities. Um, these are some of the reasons for that. These low or no cost. You keep it under your control. You can know what works in your garden and you can produce it yourself. It eliminates problems caused by, whatever comes in factory produced fertilizers and soil amendments. Also, it's not subject to international supply chain issues. A lot of fertilizer has a heavy component made from natural gas. And we know with all the geopolitical tensions around the world, natural gas shoots up and down. So the prices shoot up and down, and availability shoots up and down. So this is something to think about in terms, again, maintaining your own control over your soil fertility. The first thing, it's very basic, and it's a soil amendment. Compost is not a fertilizer in and of itself, but it is a soil amendment. And it's a very important one because it's adding organic matter back. It's adding organic matter that is fairly high quality. If you think about leaves and yard waste, that tends to be lower quality nutrition for plants, because it's a simple, grass clippings or dried leaves. Food waste is much richer just because it's a wider variety of material. It supports a larger variety of microbes and fungi, and it's very rich in nutrition, and is well worth your time and effort to run a composting program in your own home. So you can make a fertilizer out of it, and we're going to talk about that. And it's compost. So these are some of the reasons for using it. We talked about that in a moment ago. Okay, so making compost, it's really quite simple, and some people overthink it. But I prefer to have a 3-bin composting system. Doesn't even need to be a bin, it can be 3 piles. But you just want to start one, have one that's started, one that's in process, and one you're drawing from. And a simple bin made from old pallets actually works very well. You can wire them together, stack them and wire them together, just leave them open to the ground below. and then start adding organic material. And if you start getting creative, you can get all kinds of stuff. I know somebody who gathers coffee grounds from the local coffee shop, and that's been a very good addition to his particular composting program. And you just throw it in. It's good to turn it with you can get a fancy compost turner, or you can just use a pitchfork or a shovel. You don't even have to do that. You can just let it sit. If you have chickens and you have room, chickens will get into a compost and they will eat it and they will make their own soil amendments out of it. And they will speed the process along considerably, but chickens are very messy creatures. So that's a decision you need to make. Um, One thing that I've seen, and I would encourage people to think a lot about, is a lot of people make a ton of compost and hardly use any of it, or they only use it once a year. Try to use it as much as possible. Keep it an active system, because you want to get that back into the garden. You want to get that fertility back. And if it sits there, it's not doing you any good. So every spring, for example, I will take the finished and I will put that into the garden or into the flower beds or wherever. And then by the time midsummer comes around, the middle pile tends to be ready, or at least edges of it. I'll start drawing on that. And then, towards the end of the season, I'll start banking it all and begin again the next year. But think about using it. Don't let it just sit there. It's a great resource. So a great fertilizer that is easy to make and is apply with very little risk of burning anything, and you can use it regularly. You can use it as much as every 2 or 3 weeks, is compost tea. Compost tea is you get a 5-gallon bucket, um, and you put in, you won't put in 5 gallons, you fill it up 3/4 of the way full, 5 cups of compost, a quarter cup of molasses. And molasses is there, it provides the carbohydrates as the energy for the microbes to get going. And you just let it sit for 24 to 36 hours, and then you can use it as a spray, works very well, or drench it around the base of the plants. But that really kind of keeps things going. Use it in your watering cans. It's a very nice, simple fertilizer that is a kind of low energy, but a consistent supply. This is actually my favorite fertilizer in terms of actual impact on plants. It's like a turbocharger for plants. It's fish emulsion. It's also a favorite with my dogs, because when I put it out on the plants, the dogs run into the garden, try to get into the garden to go and roll in it. So you have to use it with discretion. And it's also kind of nasty to make, but if you're up for it, it's a very high-powered fertilizer. Or you can buy it actually in stores already made. But essentially, it is well-rotted, liquefied fish, various parts of fish. I got my supply last year from an old friend of mine who goes fishing, and I just said, all the trash fish that you're throwing back, or they're invasives and they're supposed to just kill them. Could you save them in a bucket for me? And the more, complete they are, the better they are. So you get a bucket and you fill it up. You fill it about a third of the way with fish. And we'll talk about the formula in a moment, but it's very, very rich nitrogen based fertilizer. It also has phosphorus and potassium and trace elements. And the soil microbes like it. It's a very good fertilizer. But this is the recipe for it. 4 to 5 pounds of fish scraps. You can go to fish store and just collect all the scraps. They'll usually give them to you willingly for free. Cover them with water. Again, a 5-gallon bucket. You want a 5-gallon bucket with a lid. You want a cup of molasses. Again, the carbohydrates in the molasses help stimulate the biological activity to ferment the fish. And then a pound or two of sawdust or very fine wood chips also works well in it to stabilize it. And this is a little bit longer to process to do. You put the fish, you cover the fish scraps in water. So the fish should be about a third of the bottom of the 5-gallon bucket. You pour the molasses and the sawdust on top, add water, give it a stir. put it someplace where you don't mind you be smelling it. So I have a old barn. It goes in the back corner of it with a top over it. It sits there, it ferments. You stir it occasionally and hold your nose. And then strain the liquid into some gallon, like just gallon jugs, like old milk jugs. And then from that, then you use that, and that'll last you a long time. That's like 2 or 3 years worth of fertilizer for me. And then you just put that, I put a glug or two into a watering can and then water my plants. I kind of go around the base of the plant. Very powerful, very good, very cheap. So dilute, 1 to 2 tablespoons per gallon of water. Others, sometimes when you buy a commercial product, they might have a different one, but just a bit. Um, You can use a soil drench, a foliar spray. And again, it's something that is powerful, but is not powerful in the way it's going to hurt your plants. So you can use it regularly during the course of your growing season. Biochar. Biochar is a very interesting phenomenon. It actually comes from prehistory, and comes from archaeological experiments. Archaeologists discovered in the Amazon basin that around centers of human habitation, the soil was much richer and it was dark. And on this picture, you can see on the left is what's called terra preta, which is soil mixed with what we're calling biochar today. And on the right is the natural soil. And the natural soil is fairly low nutrient, doesn't support a lot, wouldn't support a lot of growing. But what was created by indigenous peoples in that region, and they added essentially charcoal to organic matter to richen it and to hold moisture and nutrition. And this is something that lasted thousands of years. This practice, it died out, was rediscovered by archaeologists, and they're actually positing it as a important soil amendment for us to use today. So what it is essentially, again, is it's charcoal. Charcoal is wood or other organic material burned in a low oxygen environment, so it doesn't completely get consumed. And charcoal, if you look at it closely under a magnifying lens, has a very open structure. It's like a sponge. And it holds it. It's all of creative carbon because that's what's left when the wood is burned. And it's porous like a sponge, and so it can absorb nutrients and also release them. It has an action that goes back and forth on that continuum. Um, it works very well as a soil amendment. Um, it definitely improves the soil structure, particularly with heavy clay soils. Again, water retention is good, nutrient retention is excellent. Um, and it supports microbes. And another thing is it sequesters carbon. So that carbon that the biochar is made out of stays in the soil and will stay in the soil for hundreds of years. So it's not getting released to the atmosphere. Whereas if you let that piece of wood or the yard waste burn or just rot, it would release the carbon into the atmosphere. So it also has the potential in a small way of solving our climate problem or our carbon problem. So how do you use this? So biochar is creating those chunks of charcoal, grinding them so it's small. They're manageable. They're about the texture of coarse sand. Um, what needs to happen though is because when you first create it, it's an empty vessel. It's an empty sponge. And if you put it directly into the ground, it will absorb nutrients, but it won't release them until it's saturated. So what you have to do is it's called charging it, is you take the biochar, you pour it into a bucket, and then put in soil fertilizers. You could put in the fish fertilizer we just talked about, or a commercial fertilizer, whatever it is, it's going to get absorbed in there, and let it soak, and then pour off the water you can put it in the garden because it's fertilizer, and then it's ready to go. If you use the biochar without charging it, it will benefit the structure, but it won't benefit the nutrition until it is fully saturated, which again takes a period of time. So the way of using it is you just mix it into your soil. If you could get it up to 5 to 10% by volume, that's perfect. Uh, that really, it would depend upon someone being kind of a DIYer, though, because if you buy it, you can buy biochar, and it's kind of pricey for what it is. But if you can make it, it's literally dirt cheap. And there are various YouTube videos of how to make it. And essentially, you're taking woody waste, yard waste, and burning it in low oxygen environment, which can simply be you dig a hole in the ground, start the fire going, and then cover it loosely with wet leaves was traditionally what they did, or light soil. You don't want to put the fire out. You just want it burning at a slow, smoky fire, and let it burn for a while, and then put it out, and then you grind it, and you have biochar.
Garrett, there's a question in the chat.
Uh-huh.
My soil sample said to add lime for my cherry tree. Since I've
Mhm.
already planted the tree, can I add ashes from my wood stove on top of the ground?
You can. I would add. I wouldn't put a lot of ashes. I would put like maybe a coffee can full and work it into the soil. If it depends on how big the cherry tree is. But I'm thinking a cherry tree that's like 6 or 7 feet tall. You want to go around the drip line with like a coffee can full, not a lot. Work it into the soil and water it immediately, and that would be what I would do. So other one of my favorite fertilizers, because I have poultry and I've got a ton of it. Chicken manure. Chicken manure is kind of the opposite of compost tea. It's very high levels of really important uh, fertility agents, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Also, other trace minerals and trace uh, nutrients. But it's so high that you have to be very careful with it because it will burn and damage your plants if you use it raw. So you have to age it. Um, and it does boost your microorganisms, and it's a great way of utilizing waste from chickens. Um, I find that one of the best ways to age it actually is to mix it in with the compost and the first that first pile of the stuff you're just putting in. Mix the chicken manure in with that. It will sit for a year, and it's going to strengthen that compost tremendously. Another way to manage it is if you have a coop, you're going to have a lot of bedding material, pine shavings and the like. After you remove the larger amounts of manure under the roofs and things like that, that bedding will still have a lot of fertility in it. So mixing that in with your compost, if you need to dry it out, if you need a little woody mass in there, or have it as a separate thing, is a very good way to manage that. So we do that, pay proper composting, ensures harmful pathogens and weed seeds are destroyed. So that's a problem with all animal seeds. Um, read that. So in terms of using it, you can mix it in with the soil while you're planting. Side dressing is also very effective if your plants are up like 8 weeks out. That would be a perfect time to put in some of your aged chicken manure. Um, Again, use it moderately because it's very powerful. Very good on vegetables, especially the leafy greens and heavy feeders like garlic, like some chicken manure, etc. So the last ones we're covering are what's called green manure, cover crops. I started with talking about how it's important to keep your plants, your soil covered. And in the winter time, a winter rye is a great way of doing that. That's going to add fertility back into your garden space. So when you finish harvesting your garden for the season, what I do is I till it under. I clean up the majority of the mass and then till it under, and I plant winter rye. Winter rye is a grain. You're not going to let it grow out to be grain harvesting grain. You're going to cut it before then, but it tolerates cold weather. And you'll put it in, I tend to put it in like mid-October in this region, and it starts to grow. I haven't gotten it this tall ever, but I'm sure that would happen in a warmer region. But it holds the soil. It's also going to absorb some of the nutrients that you've put in there, some of the fertility that you put in there over the season. And then come spring, you're going to cut it down and you're going to till it back under. Another important cover crop with the same concept, you wouldn't use it in the winter, but you would use it if you were letting a portion of your garden grow fallow for a period of time, is clover. Clover will grow, and clover is a legume that fixes nitrogen. So it's going to bring nitrogen back into the soil. And again, the cover crop, it prevents a lot of problems, prevents soil erosion, improves the soil structure, adds the organic matter, suppresses weeds, and it cycles the nutrients, meaning that it brings those nutrients back into the soil rather than being run off through the course of the winter by rain and snow events. So yeah, this is basically plant in the fall. Spring, cut it down. You can just mow it with a lawn mower. Mine never, as I said, never gets that high. Or if you have a scythe or a weed whacker, will cut it down as well. And you can just till it under right into the soil. But you want to do it a few weeks beforehand so it begins to rot before you're planting. So that concludes the presentation. Does anybody have any questions? So you will get an email with the extra resources. There's one book you should really look out for in there. It's Harold Van Ness's soil book, Regenerative Soil Practices. It's a free PDF download, and it is a compendium of information about how to manage your soil. So Janet Vickers raised her hand. Janet, do you have a question?
Yes, I was wondering what exactly I need to do to get my soil tested.
So there are instructions on our website, the Herkimer CCE website, but essentially you're gonna go to your garden plot and take a trowel and dig out like a half a coffee can full from various spots, mix it up, and then bring it in, and we'll ship it off, and it will get tested. There's a charge of I think it's $15 or $18 for the test, and you'll get a complete readout that'll come to your email in a week or two's time.
Okay, can I just put it like in a Ziploc bag?
Yeah, because we're going to repackage it anyway.
Oh, okay. And I have like a couple of raised beds and then 3 other gardens, so I can do all of those separately.
Yes, you'd want to
Okay.
definitely do them separately.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. Well, thank you all. And if there's no other questions, we'll say have a good night.